I accidentally transmigrated into a popular romance novel, becoming the universally despised villainous rich girl. Because she liked the second male lead, the supporting character was jealous of the female lead and did everything she could to trip her up. The female lead was the type to exact revenge for any slight, and the supporting character eventually reaped what she sowed. I originally wanted to stay far away from the characters in the book to avoid getting swept up in the plot. But I forgot that the second male lead, Asher, was the original owner's neighbor. I looked up and met his bright eyes. "My name is Asher, what's yours?" The plot had unexpectedly begun. I had transmigrated. A very cliché start to a story. But I hadn't become the universally loved female lead. Instead, I was the malicious supporting character everyone in the novel wanted to beat up. The second male lead liked the female lead, and the supporting character liked the second male lead. Because of this, the supporting character did a lot of terrible things to frame the female lead. The female lead wasn't some naive, sweet girl, she always paid back her enemies. The result was predictable: the female lead received endless adoration, while the supporting character was utterly despised. My 11 or 12-year-old body lay sprawled spread-eagle on the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. The supporting character came from a wealthy family. Her parents' endless spoiling had made her pampered and somewhat bratty. I silently made a decision: I needed to stay as far away from those main characters as possible and live a free, unburdened life as a rich kid. "Vi, sweetie, a new family just moved in next door. Could you go out and bring them something? Mom is a bit tied up right now." I had assumed her parents' spoiling meant they couldn't bear to let her lift a finger, but apparently not. "Okay." I walked out of my room, went downstairs, picked up a basket of homemade cookies from the coffee table, and knocked on the neighbor's door. Even though I really liked the second male lead in the novel, I couldn't afford to mess with the other characters, so it was best to just write it off entirely. I was letting my mind wander absently. Click. The door in front of me opened. "Hello, I'm your next door." The words caught in my throat. I was momentarily stunned by the refreshing, handsome, and slightly boyish face of the person standing before me. He wore a light blue button-down shirt, with sharp eyebrows and bright, expressive eyes. He looked almost exactly how I had pictured the second male lead, Asher. My greeting came to an abrupt halt, but he reacted quickly. His eyes, slightly downturned at the corners, curved into a smile. "Good morning. We're neighbors now." I remembered. The second male lead, Asher, and the supporting character had been neighbors and close friends for 4 years. From 7th grade all the way to 10th grade. 4 whole years. Could he be? Then, as if to confirm my suspicion, he clearly voiced the second half of his thought. "My name is Asher, what's yours?" The boy's voice was clear, but hearing him say that name, a name I had read hundreds of times and knew inside out, only sent a chill down my spine. The villainous supporting character's tragic and absurd life had begun the very moment she met Asher. "My name is Violet." Asher and I both went to Riverside Middle School. My attempts to protest the arrangement of walking to and from school with Asher were completely useless. Unlike the original supporting character, I was extremely slow when it came to emotional attachments, and I didn't act warmly toward anyone. Because of this, back in my original world, I had very few true friends, and any newcomers were quickly driven away by my coldness. Asher would just be another one of them. Riverside Middle School wasn't far from my house. I didn't like being chauffeured around like a spoiled child, so I suggested to my mother that I walk, and she gladly agreed. I also gave up on the unrealistic idea of avoiding Asher. Since I couldn't escape him, I might as well face the situation head-on and let nature take its course. The truth was, my favorite character in the novel was Asher. Not just because of his deep devotion to the female lead, but because of his sunny, outgoing personality. He represented the kind of vibrant passion I always yearned for. Maybe he would be an exception. On the way to school, he seemed to have an endless stream of things to say. "Violet, which homeroom are you in? I'll come find you to hang out. When is your birthday? What's your zodiac sign? Do you like sweets? Do you want some gummy bears?" 7th grade kids had simple, easy-to-guess thoughts. Even though he was loud, I didn't find him annoying. I even chatted with him casually until we walked through the school gates. We were in different homerooms, but we shared most of our classes. Asher was incredibly sociable. The new semester had barely started, and he was already thick as thieves with the boys in our class. Every time the bell rang, I could hear him and his friends joking around out in the hallway, acting like the exact opposite of me. Asher stuck strictly to the agreement between our two families. As soon as the final bell rang, he would predictably appear by my locker, craning his neck to look for me, waiting for me to pack my bag so we could walk home together. The sky would grow dark, and the streetlights would flicker on. I would look down, playing with my shadow, while he enthusiastically shared interesting things that had happened that day. If I heard something I liked, I would casually chime in. Sometimes, his descriptions were so funny and ridiculous that I couldn't help but let out a soft laugh. The walk home gained a touch of fun because of him, and our relationship naturally grew closer, steadily moving toward becoming good friends. Relying on the fact that I had already survived middle and high school once, I took advantage of this rare opportunity to be a good student. In the blink of an eye, 2 years slipped by. Asher and I entered 9th grade, and our days were so peaceful it felt a bit surreal. According to the plot, Asher and I would go to Riverside High School. The female and male leads wouldn't meet until they transferred there in 10th grade. And 10th grade was also when Asher would fall in love with the female lead. That meant I only had 1 year left to get along with him peacefully. "What are you thinking about so intently?" Asher waved a hand in front of my face. I snapped back to reality and forced a small smile. "Nothing. Let's go." Just then, a few of Asher's buddies walked by and teased him, calling out, "Yo, picking up the girlfriend again?" Asher stubbornly tried to correct them. "She's not my girl. Vi looks really pretty today." "Hey, watch your mouth, see you later, Ash." The guy who had flattered me was dragged away by his friends. I didn't say anything. I had grown completely used to this kind of teasing, which had persisted from 8th grade into 9th, and it didn't bother me. Instead, I was more worried about thin-skinned Asher feeling embarrassed, so I deliberately steered away from the subject. "Let's go." "Yeah." He stayed quiet for a brief moment before returning to his usual self, chatting with me as if nothing had happened. I wasn't going to flatter myself and expect Asher to develop romantic feelings for me. The author had dictated that he would like the female lead, which meant he was destined never to fall for anyone else, including me. I sat cross-legged on the soft rug by my bed, feeling momentarily lost. In the novel, Violet was nothing more than cheap cannon fodder. The descriptions of her were so sparse that the first time I saw her face in the mirror, I was genuinely shocked. Violet was beautiful, but not in a generic way. Her features were delicate and faint, like the misty rain of a southern river town, or a slender wisp of curling smoke. Surprisingly, she even bore a slight resemblance to my own original appearance. Coupled with the aura of a wealthy heiress, her flat, indifferent gaze naturally gave off an air of dismissive arrogance. My own personality was inherently dull and detached, and I wore a face that practically screamed, "Stay away from me." I think I suddenly understood why some people didn't like me. Then again, the author never dedicated a single line to Violet's personal romantic arc. How she met Asher, why she liked him, exactly when she fell for him. None of it was ever explained. It was as if she had been brought into existence solely for the sake of the male and female leads. She didn't even have a complete life, just massive, gaping voids. Pushing the protagonist's relationship forward was her only mission in life. Because of this, I was completely in the dark about what was supposed to happen before the main couple made their grand entrance. However, I didn't think Violet would fall for Asher just because he walked her to and from school. She lived a life of pampered luxury. What kind of flattery hadn't she heard? I leaned more toward the theory that some sort of knight in shining armor scenario had played out on one of their walks. That was an easy way to capture a teenage girl's heart. Of course, I couldn't rule out the possibility that Violet was just a sucker for a handsome face. Crash. The harsh sound of shattering glass echoed from downstairs. I opened my bedroom door and headed down. With every step, the sound of a man and a woman arguing grew louder. When I reached the living room, the original owner's parents were locked in a standoff, both looking entirely unwilling to back down. I rarely saw them fight, let alone witness an atmosphere that had frozen over like this. My mother noticed me standing off to the side first. She tried to force the corners of her mouth up into a smile. "Vi, why did you come out? Did we wake you?" Having been on the verge of my senior year of high school in my original world, I understood the situation immediately. Playing dumb, I told them I was heading out for a bit. Naturally, they didn't have the time or energy to worry about me and just told me to be safe. The moment I pulled the front door shut, the shouting inside intensified. If I were the real Violet, crying and throwing a tantrum right now could probably diffuse the conflict. But I couldn't do that. Yet, despite having grown completely numb to scenes like this in my original world, my eyes and nose inexplicably began to sting. A liquid I associated with cowardice welled up in my eyes, entirely out of my control. It had to be the original owner's lingering emotions affecting me. I haphazardly wiped the blurring tears away with my fingertips, burying my face in the crook of my arm to muffle my crying. The tears shifted into tiny, quiet whimpers. Images flashed through my mind. I heard a woman screaming, a man hurling abuse, and a little girl crying. Amidst my own sobbing, the realization hit me. The person crying wasn't Violet. It was me. It was the me who had been triggered into remembering my own nightmare of a past. I cried until I had nothing left. Just as I was getting ready to stand up, the door to Asher's house swung open without warning. I snapped my head up and met his worried gaze. He was wearing a loose, pure white short-sleeved t-shirt today. When he saw me, the concern in his eyes was instantly replaced by shock. "Vi, are you?" But he caught himself quickly. His expression seamlessly shifted into a bright smile as he reached a hand out to me. "Were you coming to find me? Come on, let me take you somewhere fun." The second those words left his mouth, my heart gave an unavoidable violent lurch. I realized then that this must have been the exact moment Violet fell in love with Asher. It felt as if a sudden ray of light had broken through the dark. I hesitantly started to reach my hand out. He didn't wait. He proactively grabbed my hand and broke into a light jog out of the building. "Where are we going?" Asher didn't look back. His cuffs fluttered and bounced in the wind, like a white dove flapping its wings, ready to take flight. His voice drifted back from ahead of me. "To a place that will make someone happy." His hand was warm and strong, as if it possessed the power to pull me right out of my shackles. "I don't even know what place could possibly make me happy." The wind carried his bright, hearty laugh to my ears, tinged with a hint of pride. "Who do you think I am?" "I'm Asher. Don't worry, satisfaction guaranteed." His utterly confident yet intentionally goofy tone pulled a laugh out of me. The two teenagers ran hand in hand down a tree-lined path, stepping over the scattered spots of sunlight filtering through the canopy of leaves. Staring at his somewhat slender back, I was suddenly overcome by a wave of inexplicable melancholy. This was probably going to be one of the very few moments of physical closeness we would ever share. In just one more year, his destined person was going to appear. "Asher." I called out to him. He slammed on the brakes immediately. "Let's not go." He turned around, looking at me with confusion. "What's wrong?" I shook my head and pressed my lips together. "I'm not sad anymore." I turned my head and pointed at a nearby flower shop, issuing an unreasonable command. "Buy me a bouquet of forget-me-nots." "All right." He patted the back of my head and walked into the shop. A short while later, he emerged from beneath a trellis of wisteria, holding a bunch of forget-me-nots. The pale purple wisteria blossoms made his face look even cleaner and more defined, like a pool of spring water rippling with scattered leaves. What a shame. My perfect coax the crybaby plan, ruined. "All it took was a few flowers to make you happy," Asher said, shoving his hands into his pockets and sighing with exaggerated nonchalance. "I'm not a crybaby." "Yes, you are." "I am not." Asher walked me home at a very slow pace. I kept my hands behind my back as we chatted. The streetlights flickered on, stretching our shadows out incredibly long. The year flew by in the blink of an eye. I spent the summer break happily with Asher. I was like a greedy gambler, delusional enough to want to hoard every single second of his time. But logic held me back. I blamed the feeling on the original owner's uncontrollable affection for him. I really couldn't blame her though. Asher was just too good. If I hadn't known his heart would eventually belong to someone else, I probably would have fallen for him too. Who doesn't love the sun? Asher and I made it into Riverside High School's honors program. When he found out we shared most of our classes again, he was thrilled, vividly imagining our life as deskmates. I told him he looked like an orphan child who had finally found his family. He scratched his head and forced himself to calm down, but he couldn't hide the stars shining in his eyes. I couldn't help but laugh. Pretending to give it some serious thought, I cleared my throat and said, "Wake up earlier tomorrow. Otherwise, All the good seats will be taken. Yes, ma'am. Miss Violet. He gave me a mock salute. You're so childish. Let's go. Walking home with Asher still required a certain amount of courage and thick skin. The next morning, I surprisingly woke up bright and early. The moment I stepped out the door, I saw Asher leaning against the porch railing. He shot me a resentful glare. If we don't get the seats. All right, Your Majesty, my fault. Hurry up. I unceremoniously grabbed the hem of his jacket and hauled him downstairs. We ran out of the neighborhood, and Asher, still clutching my collar, led me over to the bicycle parking area. He threw a leg over the seat, rang the bike bell at me, and flashed a smug eyebrow-raising smile. How about that? I'm the one with foresight. I got the bike ready ahead of time. Staring at the familiar-looking scene in front of me, I froze for a second. Prompted by Asher's confused urging, I snapped out of it and settled onto the back seat. Asher rang the bell again and started pedaling. Here we go. By the way, Vi, did you gain weight? Get lost. I punched him in the back, and he burst into loud laughter. He laughed so freely. His windbreaker billowed in the air, flapping like the wings of a soaring bird. My view was blocked, but I could picture exactly what he looked like when he smiled, as radiant as the sun. It was the best kind of smile a 16 or 17-year-old boy could have. Carefree, fearless, and totally unrestrained. Meanwhile, my own hot-blooded impulsiveness had been ground away by life a long time ago, crushed into dust and scattered in some dark, unnoticeable corner. Asher rode incredibly fast, making it feel like we were about to strike sparks against the air. I thought to myself that it was a good thing the back seat had a backrest to hold on to. Otherwise, I would have had to grip his clothes or wrap my arms around him. It was better to draw the line right here. There was no need to take our relationship any further. We got our wish and were among the first to arrive. I picked a window seat in the third row from the back. Asher had assumed I would pick the very last row, since I had always sat in the back throughout middle school and never tried to fit in. I just smiled and didn't say a word. The last row was reserved for the male and female leads. Just like the protagonists in every idol drama, they would meet, get to know each other, and have a passionate, earth-shattering romance there. I started recalling the novel's plot. The female lead, Serena, originally came from a wealthy family. After her family fell on hard times, she was forced to move in with her aunt. Relying entirely on her stellar grades, she transferred into Riverside High School. The male lead, Ethan, had crossed paths with Serena a few times when they were kids. When he found out she was transferring to Riverside High, he didn't hesitate to arrange a transfer for himself. Ethan pulled strings to get in, and he was too arrogant to even introduce himself. He just sat in the back row, put his head down, and went to sleep. But it wasn't time for that yet. The main characters always made their grand entrance last. I sorted through the main plot points in my head and suddenly realized Asher hadn't spoken in a while. I turned my head and caught him leaning in close to me. I disgustedly pressed my hand against his forehead to push him back. What are you doing? He blinked, asking curiously, You smell like forget-me-nots again. Do you really like them that much? Having him pointed out so bluntly made my face burn instantly. Why are you asking? Kids shouldn't stick their noses into women's business. Asher curled his lip and muttered, stingy. And what do you mean, women? I heard that. Asher apologized at the speed of light. My bad. I drank the strawberry milk Asher had brought for me while working on a workbook. The class was mostly full, we were just waiting for the two main characters to arrive. During that time, a few former middle school classmates who happened to end up in our homeroom came over to say hi. Among them was the boy who had complimented my looks before. He had a loose tongue and jokingly called me something along the lines of sister-in-law. This time, before Asher could even say anything, I laughed and said, We're just friends. Then I looked at Asher. I assumed he wouldn't get awkward about it this time, but I thought I saw a flash of disappointment in his eyes. I probably just imagined it. The back door was kicked open. A slouching guy with a backpack slung over one shoulder walked in. His bangs hung down, covering his eyebrows, but it wasn't hard to see that his features were sharp and handsome. He walked straight to the back row and sat down, completely naturally. Ring. The morning bell rang. That had to be the male lead, Ethan. Ethan casually tossed his backpack onto his desk. He made quite a bit of noise, and a lot of people turned around to look at him. He acted as if he didn't notice a thing, just rested his head on the desk and went to sleep. The guy acted like absolutely no one else in the room existed. Sure enough, the people who knew each other started whispering. "Who is that? No idea, never seen him before. Maybe he's from out of town? He's pretty hot." I watched for a few seconds before losing interest. Asher was looking at him too. In the original text, Ethan targeted Asher quite a bit out of jealousy. I didn't want him having too much contact with Ethan, so I grabbed his head and forced him to look forward. "Read your book." Just as I was wondering what was taking the homeroom teacher so long, a friendly, balding, middle-aged man walked into the classroom with a beaming smile. Following right behind him was a breathtakingly beautiful girl. She had an extraordinary aura, and the long, straight, slender legs peeking out from under her skirt made quite a few of the boys' eyes light up. The teacher tapped on the podium, signaling the class to quiet down. The girl stood off to the side, her eyes cast downward. Her hair was like black silk draped over her shoulders, making her look incredibly docile. The teacher introduced himself as Mr. Foster first. Then he said, "This is our new transfer student. Why don't you introduce yourself?" She nodded and took half a step forward toward the podium, her voice melodic. "Hello everyone, my name is Serena." "How do you spell that?" a boy interrupted. Even though this was the honors program, there were still a few kids whose parents had bought their way in, and their spoiled upbringings naturally gave them a cruel streak. Serena offered a faint smile. She turned around and wrote her name on the whiteboard. She casually tossed the marker back into the tray. "Is that okay?" Her demeanor was steeped in arrogance. I wasn't sure if they were intimidated by her presence, but not a single person made a sound. Seeing this, Serena gave a small bow to conclude her introduction. "I hope we can all get along." Asher leaned in close to my ear. He smelled faintly of oranges. "That Serena girl is pretty interesting." The corner of my milk carton crumpled slightly between my fingers. I gave a lukewarm reply. "Yeah." Mr. Foster scanned the room and placed Serena next to Ethan. Serena stepped down from the podium and walked toward our side of the room. She had alluring fox-like eyes and looked like a vibrant, stunning lotus flower. She sat down at her desk, only to realize that the boy sitting next to her had mistakenly shoved his backpack into her desk cubby. Serena frowned and shoved it right back into his. "So arrogant. Wow, the new girl is so cool. I'm going to go make friends with her after class." I gave him a helpless, subtle smile. "Pay attention to the lesson first." Asher obediently shut his mouth and focused on the lecture. The moment the bell rang and I snapped the cap back onto my pen, Asher bolted over to Serena to talk to her. I couldn't really describe what I was feeling. Was I sad? Was I angry? Mostly, I felt regret. I could have held him back. If I had just grabbed his hand a moment ago, would he and Serena have never become friends? Would he have never fallen for her? Would he have never been subjected to that heartbreaking, unrequited love? But I was too scared. I didn't have the courage to try and alter the plot. I wouldn't be able to handle the butterfly effect it would cause. People like me had lost the right to be impulsive, crazy, and reckless a long time ago. On the walk home, he laughed happily and brought her up without even realizing it. "Speaking of which, Serena actually reminds me a little bit of you." My footsteps faltered for a second. "How so?" "Her vibe. You both carry yourselves like European aristocrats." "I'll take that as a compliment." Asher kicked a small pebble, shifting the topic. "But it's still different. Even though you always keep a straight face, Vi, you have a really soft heart. Everyone says Serena is pretty, but she's too arrogant. Besides, you're way prettier than her." He said the words, but his eyes told a different story. I lowered my gaze and teased him in a joking tone. "Smooth talker. I bet when you're standing in front of Serena, you think she's the prettier one." Asher clutched his chest, putting on a show of utter devastation. "So this is the kind of person you think I am. You've broken my heart." I gave his shin a light kick. "Cut it out." Inside though, I couldn't stop my mind from spiraling. Then what am I in your heart? A neighbor, or just a friend? There were barely any pedestrians on the road. We walked one behind the other, joking and messing around. Under the moonlight, the wisteria planted outside that flower shop looked cold and solitary. Asher and Serena grew closer and closer. He started bringing her strawberry yogurt, and when he found out she didn't like it, he immediately switched to plain milk. He also brought her snacks, lent her his umbrella. Gradually, Serena was receiving the exact same treatment I was. I didn't try to bully Serena to get Asher's attention. I wasn't that kind of spoiled, arrogant brat. Furthermore, I knew that Serena's position in his heart would eventually surpass mine. It was only a matter of time. Why would I humiliate myself like that? One day, Mr. Foster suggested we bring some potted plants from home to help beautify the campus. I cradled my few precious forget-me-nots in my arms and walked down the path, bathed in the soft morning sunlight. Asher caught up with me. The moment he opened his mouth, he was interrogating me, his tone sounding incredibly pitiful. Why haven't you been waiting for me lately? I forgot. I'm sick and tired of hearing you talk about Serena every single day. Do I look like an idiot to you? I couldn't help but laugh. A little bit. Asher pretended to be mad. After I spent a few words coaxing him, he asked, "Aren't these your favorite forget-me-nots? You're really willing to bring them to school? Aren't you worried someone will snap them off?" "If someone snaps them, I'll check the security cameras and beat them up," I replied flatly. Vi, it's actually pretty terrifying when you say things like that with a completely straight face. I gave him a polite smile. Thanks for the compliment. I carefully placed the forget-me-nots on a small ledge in the hallway. Asher ran out and stuck a little label on the pot. His handwriting had always been as free-spirited and unrestrained as he was, but the way he wrote Violet was actually kind of cute. The forget-me-nots thrived under my care. You could see that splash of pale blue from a mile away. Asher would help me water them whenever he was free. But the second Serena showed up, he would go trailing right after her, acting exactly like a two-timing scoundrel. But the weather is always unpredictable. Right in the middle of class, raindrops started knocking against the glass windows with increasing frequency. That was just the prelude. It didn't take long for a torrential downpour to unleash itself, aggressive and fierce. The raindrops crashed against the windows in endless waves, and the tree branches clawed wildly at the sheets of rain, whipped around by the gale. The storm came on so suddenly, it felt like it wanted to crush everything in its path. I couldn't help but worry about my fragile little forget-me-nots, and my eyebrows knit tightly together. Asher noticed my anxiety. He tried to calm me down. "Don't worry too much, it's probably just a sun shower. It'll stop soon. Look over there." I looked in the direction he was pointing and saw a stray beam of sunlight piercing through the horizon. My expression softened slightly, and I murmured a quiet thank you. It turned out exactly as Asher had predicted. Before the agonizingly long physics class was even over, the sky gradually brightened, the sound of the rain ceased, and the sun hastily peeked back out. The physics teacher kept us 2 minutes late. The second he left, Asher shot out of the classroom like an arrow from a bow. I heard that after a sun shower, there's a really high chance of seeing a rainbow. I heard 2 girls in the front row say, "A rainbow?" Just then, Asher's voice rang out from the back door. "Vi, there's a rainbow." I followed his voice and saw a scene that would be hard to forget for a very long time. The wall of the classroom facing the hallway also had large, wide windows. The white clouds in the sky, as pure and soft as cotton, leaned against the dark silhouettes of the distant mountains and the nearby school buildings. A hazy arc of colors hung suspended between 2 white clouds, faint and indistinct, like a veil of cicada wings left behind by a weaving maiden. Asher stood in the doorway at the back of the room. The stray hairs framing his forehead stuck up at odd angles. He held my pot of forget-me-nots in his hands, and his eyes were brimming with excited laughter as he looked at me. The light coated him in a thin, shimmering halo of gold. The forget-me-nots were brightly colored, but they couldn't compare to even a fraction of the brilliance in his eyes. As reality proved, even if I didn't go out of my way to mess with the female lead Serena, someone else would. Riverside security was a lot better than it used to be, but there were always a few criminals who slipped through the cracks. Sometimes, local thugs would loiter in the alleys near the high school where there wasn't much foot traffic, looking for people walking alone to mug. That was the main reason my mother had suggested Asher and I walk to and from school together. Serena got targeted by a few mean girls in our grade. They blocked her on her usual route home and warned her to stay away from Ethan. Serena didn't play by their rules. She asked, "Are you Ethan's girlfriend?" The girl thought Serena was mocking her. "None of your business. Since you're not his girlfriend, what right do you have to tell me to stay away from him?" Serena raised an eyebrow. "Because you like him? You liking him is none of my business either." Humiliated and enraged, the girl raised her arm, aiming to slap Serena across the face. Ethan arrived right in the nick of time, slapping the girl's wrist away and pulling Serena behind him to protect her. A classic knight in shining armor moment. The next day, as soon as Asher found out, he sprinted over to Serena and inspected her from head to toe before finally letting out a sigh of relief. Serena brushed it off. "I'm fine. Ethan helped me, you don't need to worry." "Absolutely not. Ethan isn't here today. What if you run into them again?" Asher volunteered himself, his voice raising in his agitation. "I'm walking you home tonight." I wasn't sitting far from them. Every single word drilled its way clearly into my ears. After Asher blurted out that sentence, the two of them fell dead silent. I guess they were both looking at me in unison. I pretended not to hear, furiously scribbling away on a piece of scratch paper. I knew Ethan wasn't coming today, and I knew Asher would walk Serena home. I just occasionally wanted to be naive and hold on to a tiny sliver of hope for something I knew was impossible. Even though I had known the answer in my heart all along, hearing it with my own ears still left me dazed for a long time. He had said it without a second's hesitation, practically swearing an oath. He hadn't paused for even a fraction of a second on my account. What kind of emotion was in his eyes when he looked at me at that moment? It doesn't matter anymore, I thought. The sun dipped below the horizon, and darkness swallowed the sky. Asher and I walked side by side, but our minds were miles apart. He kept staring ahead at Serena, who was walking alone, while stealing glances at me, clearly struggling to find the words to say. I ignored his intense staring. With Asher's personality, he wouldn't be able to hold it in for much longer. Finally, just as we were nearing the school gates, he awkwardly broke the silence. Vi. Yeah. I have something to do today. Can you walk home by yourself?" he asked tentatively. "Yeah." Before I could even ask, he spilled everything out all at once. "It's nothing major, really. You know how Serena got cornered yesterday. Those guys might try to mess with her again today. So I'm going to walk her home. It's not safe for a girl to be out by herself." Asher assumed Serena had been targeted by the local thugs. But he forgot that my house was in the exact same direction as his, while Serena lived in the complete opposite direction. He forgot that I was a girl too, and that I would be just as defenseless against a grown man. Looking into Asher's eyes, my memories suddenly flashed back to the past. Before Serena had shown up, I used to catch faint glimpses of my own reflection in his eyes. But now, his eyes were entirely filled with Serena. How could someone change so fast? I heard myself speak. My voice was incredibly cold and flat, like ice under a winter moon. Only I knew how much grievance was mixed into it. "What about me?" Asher froze. He clearly hadn't expected me to ask that. I stopped walking and stood at the fork in the road, staring straight at him. I was like a lost traveler wandering a desert, desperate for a dried-up source of water. "What on earth gave you the illusion that it's perfectly safe for me to walk home alone?" I had never interfered with his interactions with Serena. It wouldn't have worked. He was going to fall in love with Serena no matter what. He was only going to fall in love with Serena. I refused to play the role of the clown. He didn't speak for a long time. Sometimes, silence is an answer all on its own. I understood perfectly. "She's getting far away. You should hurry up and chase after her." Having said that, I turned around and walked down the fork leading back to my house. A few seconds later, I heard the sound of running footsteps fading into the distance behind me. I let out a long breath and thought to myself, our relationship is probably over. I walked alone for a while. My eyelid kept twitching. A bad feeling rose in my chest. Was I actually going to run into thugs? Just as I was about to call my family, two guys with cigarettes dangling from their mouths stepped out of an alley right in front of me. They spotted me. One of them whistled at me. It was a signal of danger. But I had nowhere to run. I tried to stay calm and quickly pressed the lock button on my phone screen 5 times. It automatically dialed 911. They stopped right in front of me. I asked, "Are you trying to rob me? If I give you my money, will you let me go?" The two men looked at each other and burst out laughing, eyeing me up and down with malicious intent. "Usually, yeah. But..." One of them, a guy with bleached blonde hair, grabbed my chin. His gaze was so lecherous it made me sick. "Since you're so pretty, little girl, why don't you hang out with us for a bit?" I frowned, my face screaming resistance. I gripped the pepper spray hidden in my sleeve tightly, waiting for the right moment to break free. The very next second, just as I swatted the blonde guy's filthy hand away, a figure suddenly shot out of the alley behind them and punched the blonde guy squarely in the face. I immediately whipped out my pepper spray, squeezed my eyes shut, and sprayed wildly in the direction of the other thug. Then came the muffled groans of two men in pain. I was about to open my eyes when the heroic Good Samaritan, who apparently possessed the ability to read minds, quickly covered my eyes with his hand. "Don't look," he said hoarsely. I froze. Why did his voice sound so much like Asher? I blinked, my eyelashes brushing against his palm. Asher. No. Well, that confirmed it. It was definitely him. Beneath my shock, a shameful trace of joy managed to break through the surface of my heart. I pulled his hand away and looked him in the eye. The hostile aggression hadn't fully faded from his posture yet, and the unconscious thugs lay at his feet. Asher didn't dare look at me. His eyes darted everywhere, looking exactly like a little kid who had just been caught doing something wrong by his mother. I felt like I was losing my mind, because I actually found him acting like this kind of cute. "Asher, thank you." He snapped his head around to look at me, his eyes widening in utter disbelief. "You're not mad at me?" Looking into his bright eyes, my nose stung for no apparent reason, and a sudden urge to cry washed over me. I didn't know when it had started, but I had become so incredibly fragile. I had just opened my mouth to say something when Asher's pupils suddenly shrank. He grabbed my hand and sprinted in the direction of my house. I heard it too, the wailing sirens of police cars. This residential area was very quiet, with barely any cars or pedestrians. Our footsteps echoed between the buildings, shattering the stillness. The wind rushing past my ears wasn't the only sound, there was also the muffled crying of a coward. I just wanted to run faster with him. Faster and faster. Fast enough to outrun time, to cross the boundaries of dimensions, to escape this fictional world and run to a place where there were no female leads or supporting characters. Asher heard me choking on my tears. He slowed to a stop and looked back at me. I immediately turned my head to the side, hiding my face so he couldn't see. "Don't look, it's ugly." But Asher gently took hold of the hand I was using to cover my face. His movements were impossibly soft. I shuddered and looked up at him reflexively. Under the warm golden fragments of light sliced apart by the leaves, his smile was so gentle. "It's not ugly. You're beautiful. Some people cry harder the more you comfort them. I wasn't one of those people." But the moment I met Asher's gaze, a gaze so tender it made my head spin, I lost the battle once again, crying until my defenses completely collapsed. Asher panicked, totally at a loss for what to do. "Why are you crying even harder?" "Yeah, why am I crying?" Because I knew I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I had fallen in love with Asher a long time ago. Since I had already stepped into the swamp, struggling was useless. It would only make me sink deeper. He clumsily and awkwardly patted my back, guiltily apologizing to me. "I'm sorry, it's my fault. I never should have left you alone, and I can't walk anymore. Carry me." I cut him off. My eyes felt dry and uncomfortable, so I had no choice but to squint at him and issue a command. Asher stood frozen for a second before realizing what I had said. His face broke into a massive grin. "Yes, ma'am. I very, very rarely acted this childish. But it was Asher. And the Violet whose heart raced, who felt nervous, who got jealous, and who felt depressed, had always been me." I rested on Asher's back. After struggling internally for a few moments, I couldn't contain my curiosity and asked him, "Weren't you walking Serena home? How did you end up right in front of me?" Asher's steps were steady. I could barely feel any bouncing. He wasn't even breathing hard as he answered me. "Actually, I hadn't walked her very far when I saw patrol cops investigating around her neighborhood, so I felt safe running back. I actually saw you, but when I realized you had run into those thugs, I ducked into the alley to take a shortcut and beat them up. He went quiet for a moment, then asked out of nowhere, "It was pretty scary, wasn't it?" It was phrased as a question, but he said it like a statement. "Actually, what are you doing?" Before he could finish explaining, I reached out and ruffled his fluffy hair. It wasn't scary at all. It was really cool. Really, incredibly cool. Asher's mood soared. I thought so too. I rested my chin on his shoulder and scoffed. Shameless. I turned my head to look at the swaying trees across the street, suddenly remembering something. According to the original plot, Asher escorting Serena home tonight was the exact catalyst that made him realize he had feelings for her. Since he had come back to save me, maybe he hadn't fully figured out his feelings for Serena yet? "Ash, how do you feel about Serena?" Asher answered honestly. "How do I feel? I like her, probably. What else could it be?" I felt like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over my head. I was freezing to the bone. I didn't process a single word he said after that. I wasn't going to be able to change the novel's plot. I was just a meaningless speck in the grand scheme of things. The second male lead, Asher, would always fall in love with the female lead, Serena. In this teen romance novel, I was entirely expendable. "Look, Vi." I looked up. It was the flower shop. It was still embraced by massive clusters of wisteria. A wind chime hung in the window, its pendant shaped like tiny interconnected wisteria blossoms. I forced myself to act natural and looked for a topic to talk about. The tortuous psychological journey I had just been through was something I would have to swallow on my own. Asher couldn't see my face, so he remained completely oblivious. He chimed in, "What is it?" "Deep longing and love." Saying it out loud was actually pretty cheesy, but I knew Asher wouldn't make fun of me for being overly sentimental. "What about forget-me-nots?" I purposely kept him in suspense. "I'll tell you when the time comes. No looking it up secretly." When the time comes?" I lowered my eyes, my voice fading into a whisper. It sounded like I was talking to him, but also like I was talking to myself. "Soon." We talked a lot that night. From the stars and the ocean to the streets and the alleys. Even thick-skulled Asher noticed something was off. "You're talking a lot more than usual today, Vi. What's going on?" Saying goodbye had turned into a rope, pulling so tightly around my neck that I couldn't speak. My lips trembled. As if I had been intoxicated by the bright moonlight, I softly murmured his name. "Asher." I pressed my forehead against his back, burying my face in the fabric of his shirt. My words came out muffled. "I like you." "What did you say?" He hadn't heard me clearly. I crossed my arms and let them hang over his chest. I intentionally leaned close to his ear. I said, "It's going to rain tomorrow." "You're bluffing. The sky is totally clear." Just as he said, the night sky was completely clean and cloudless. Even the faint stars seemed much brighter than usual. I gave a small smile. "Believe what you want." I knew I shouldn't have confessed to him, but I couldn't just let it go. We were so incredibly close. I was pressed against his solid back. If I just dipped my head, I could see the flutter of his eyelashes. I could kiss his cheek. Yet I had never felt like we were so far apart. I was standing on one bank of the river, and he was on the other. He was hidden in thick fog, and I couldn't see him clearly. Late that night, I saw Asher. He stood in a field of forget-me-nots, his eyes curving into a smile as he looked at me. He said he liked me. I snapped my eyes open. It was a dream. I absent-mindedly twirled the forget-me-nots Asher had given me between my fingers. "Vi, sweetie, are you all packed? We need to leave." I placed the forget-me-nots into the mailbox outside the door. I had originally put the box there on a whim, just wanting to decorate a bit. I never expected it to come in handy for this. Hearing my mother urging me from downstairs, I called back, "Coming." I carried my suitcase downstairs and shoved it into the trunk. I swiftly got into the car and pulled the door shut. "Let's go." My mother asked me, "Are you really not going to tell Asher?" The smile froze on my face instantly. I shook my head. "There's no need." She sighed and didn't try to persuade me further, instructing the driver to go. The supporting character Violet's screen time ended in 10th grade. Ethan, wanting to protect Serena from any negative influence, had pulled some strings to force Violet's family to move. From this point forward, Violet's future was a blank slate to me as well. I leaned against the car window. The scenery outside flashed past my eyes like a high-speed reel of film. A few minutes later, the sky suddenly began to spit fine, dense droplets of rain. Not long after, the rain intensified, crashing down loudly. My words had become a prophecy. This sudden torrential downpour marked the final curtain call of my absurd youth. I stared out at the completely unfamiliar surroundings and thought to myself, I should be free now. Violet didn't show up today. His mom said Violet had something to do, but Violet hadn't told him about it. She probably just forgot. She was always like that. It started raining right around noon. Asher thought of Violet. What she had said actually came true. When he went to the cafeteria at lunch, he saw that the petals of the forget-me-nots in the hallway had been beaten down onto the floor by the rain. He couldn't help but feel a stab of panic. Violet was going to be so sad when she saw them tomorrow. During the lunch break, Asher glanced over at the empty seat next to him. His heart felt completely hollow. He watched the leaves outside the window getting forced down by the rhythmic pounding of the rain and dozed off in a haze. With Violet gone, Asher felt inexplicably frustrated and found his mind wandering constantly. He didn't even hear Serena when she actively tried to get his attention. Even though a voice in his head kept repeating, "You're supposed to like Serena," his heart would ache every time he gave Serena attention and left Violet out in the cold. Whenever he thought of Serena, a different pair of eyes as calm as still water, would float into his mind. They were Violet's misty eyes. He had thought he liked Serena. But now that Violet wasn't by his side, he finally, belatedly realized that the person lodged deep in his subconscious had always been Violet. That had never changed. Asher suffered through the agonizingly long evening study hall. Suddenly enlightened, he practically flew down the street. Everything in his sight felt exceptionally bright. But when he ran to Violet's front door, the only thing waiting for him was a tightly shut iron gate. Asher knocked on the door, calling out Violet. No one answered. Only the faint scent of flowers lingering in the air carried tiny traces of her presence. It was then that he noticed a forget-me-not and a small card sitting quietly in the mailbox to the side. Asher pulled the card out. The handwriting on it was the one he was most familiar with. It was elegant and restrained, the strokes soft. It was just as faint and detached as its owner. There was no signature. Just a single, simple sentence. The language of forget-me-nots, true love and eternal memory. End. Extra 1, Parallel Universe. 8th grader Violet sat on the couch, leisurely eating an apple. She thought to herself that living like this wasn't actually too bad. Just then, the sound of an argument erupted from next door. Not long after, a door slammed out in the hallway. Violet always had a habit of keeping the TV volume incredibly low, so she heard the commotion outside perfectly clearly. She walked over to the door and looked through the peephole. A young boy was crouching in front of the door across the hall, his head hanging low. His shoulders were trembling slightly. It looked like he was crying. Violet froze. Asher? He was actually crying. The hand she had reflexively placed on the doorknob stopped moving. She couldn't go out there right now. 13 or 14 was an age where pride meant everything. He definitely wouldn't want anyone seeing him in such an embarrassing state. So she waited quietly, checking on Asher's condition through the peephole again a few moments later. By this time, Asher had managed to collect himself. He wiped the wet, sticky tears from his face. Violet silently recited the script she had prepared in her head, then slowly opened her front door. She locked eyes with Asher, who was just about to stand up. His eyes were a dark brown, the rims slightly red. It actually made him look a bit adorable, like a little rabbit. Violet's words of comfort were right on the tip of her tongue, but she slammed on the brakes and silently swallowed the comforting platitudes right back down. She suddenly realized that Asher didn't need any comforting at all. He just needed company, exactly like she had in the past. Having been caught crying, Asher stood up awkwardly. His brain went into overdrive, desperately trying to come up with an excuse to save face. The girl in front of him spoke. Her expression was indifferent, but her voice was beautiful. "Do you want to go for a walk together?" She held her hand out to him. Before Asher could even react, Violet, looking entirely calm, took a step forward, grabbed him by the wrist that was hanging at his side, and started leading him away without any room for argument. "Where are we going?" Asher stared at Violet's back as she broke into a light jog. Her hair formed a beautiful arc as it whipped around in the wind. He caught a faint whiff of a fresh, clean scent. It smelled like flowers, though he wasn't sure what kind. Violet's tone was flat. "I don't know." It was an inexplicably righteous answer. Asher was provoked into wanting to laugh by her deadpan, honest response. Riverside's landscaping was very well maintained. The sunlight spilling through the leaves landed on Violet's hair, making her glow like a fairy. Asher lowered his eyes. The pale hand holding his wrist looked like high-quality mutton fat jade. This dreamy, beautiful scene, like something straight out of an idol drama, caused the romantic cells in the teenage boy's body to inappropriately start acting up. He asked softly, "Violet, is this like one of those elopements in TV shows?" Immediately after, he felt the girl in front of him stiffen for a second. Then, as if accepting her fate, she let out a sigh and said helplessly, "If you say so." Asher's mood cleared up, and his chatterbox tendencies returned. "You smell really good. What is that scent?" Violet was extremely sensitive to questions like this. A wave of shame crawled up her ears. But what bad intentions could a teenage kid possibly have? They ran past a flower shop. Clusters of wisteria leaned heavily against the storefront, and the wind chime jingled in the breeze. He heard her say, "It's forget-me-nots. Extra 2. My name is Violet. I don't like bringing up my original name on my own accord." The memories tethered to that name hit me like a flood of savage beasts, making it impossible to breathe. "My name is Violet Thorne. My mother named me Violet, but she always called me Letty. She was born into a family of teachers. She was gentle, virtuous, and the quintessential good girl. When they met, my father was just a problematic student with terrible grades, a bad temper, and a permanent reservation at the principal's office. But he was surprisingly patient with my mother. The lackadaisical high school outcast pursued her with a fierce, flashy intensity. Even my timid, slow-to-warm-up mother couldn't avoid getting swept up in the whirlwind of his romance. My mother's grades had always been excellent. She easily got into a state university to study education. My father dropped out of community college and started working at a factory, doing exhausting, grueling labor. The difference in their status was like night and day, but they didn't care. Ignoring her family's objections, my mother stubbornly went to the courthouse with my father and got married. When I was 8 or 9, my father still loved us very much, and my mother was still very happy. Back then, I would eagerly pester my mother to tell me the story of how she and my dad met. She would smile so gently, pull me into her arms, and talk in a soft voice. I've forgotten most of the specific, fragmented details. I only remember asking her, "So how did Mommy and Daddy get together?" Because that day, Daddy took Mommy to see the fireworks. In my childish innocence, I imagined they must have been incredibly, incredibly beautiful fireworks. But later on, everything changed. My father took a low-level office job at some company. He made a bad investment and lost a lot of money. For a family that wasn't exactly wealthy to begin with, this was undoubtedly salt in the wound. My father never recovered from the setback. He spent his days drinking and partying, coming home dead drunk in the middle of the night. He would stumble into the house reeking of alcohol. If my mother simply asked him a few questions, he would shove her away impatiently. Once those days started, there was no end in sight. But the true nightmare was far worse than that. One night, my father miraculously came home early. Even though the stench of alcohol on him was as thick as ever, my mother was thrilled, because that day was her birthday. She thought my father had actually remembered. So when she smelled the overpowering scent of women's perfume on his jacket and noticed the faint lipstick stain on his collar, her smile froze. It felt like something inside her had completely collapsed. I happened to be heading out. My mother told me she had something to discuss with my father and asked me to come back a little later. But it was the middle of the night. Where could I possibly go? I closed the front door. The soundproofing did practically nothing. The sounds of their arguing drilled uncontrollably into my ears, and a sense of utter powerlessness swallowed me whole. I crouched in front of the door, burying my head in my arms. I heard my mother screaming out of control, and my father's violent, abusive yelling. Finally, unable to hold it in any longer, I burst into tears. Back then, I didn't get a hand reaching out to pull me up. In a daze, I lost track of time. Eventually, the house fell quiet again. I rubbed my aching legs and used my key to open the door. The living room was a disaster zone. When my mother saw me, she quickly pulled down her pant leg to hide the dark bruises on her knees. She bent down to pick up the broken shards of glass on the floor, but I stopped her. "I'll do it. Letty." "Mom." I threw the larger shards into the trash can, then looked up at her. "Let's leave." My mother's pupils shrank slightly. She offered a weak defense. "Your father just had too much to drink at a work dinner." I didn't know if she was trying to convince me or convince herself. This isn't the first time he's done this. I wasn't in the mood to carefully choose my words. I just wanted to cut straight to the point and shatter her unrealistic fantasies. When things like this happen, a first time means there will be countless more times. My mother's expression softened slightly after hearing that. She stared blankly in the direction of the bedroom, where my father had drunkenly stumbled. Finally, she shook her head, her eyes flashing with a laughable sense of determination. "I'm not leaving. Don't you know exactly how he treats you?" I hadn't controlled my volume well, it came out entirely as an accusation. My mother didn't get angry. Instead, a forgiving smile touched her lips, as if she were laughing at my childishness. "When Letty falls in love with someone, you'll understand, Mom." I snorted in disagreement. If the consequence of loving someone was losing yourself, then I would rather die alone. I envied my mother. She could offer her heart to someone without holding anything back. She wasn't afraid of getting hurt, and once she made up her mind about something, she would stubbornly stick to it until the bitter end. I blamed my mother. She was as naive as a child still listening to fairy tales. She knew full well that my father wasn't the man he used to be, yet she clung to that tiny faint sliver of hope and refused to let go. My mother's deep devotion didn't make my father turn over a new leaf. I witnessed his repulsive drunken rampages firsthand several times. Once, I couldn't take it anymore. I lunged at him, using all my strength to shove him away. His footing was sloppy and weak, and he crashed to the floor. I grabbed his half-finished beer bottle from the table, gripped the neck, and smashed the bottom off. The exploding glass shards grazed the back of my hand, instantly drawing blood. But I didn't care about treating the wound. I aimed the jagged rim of the half-broken bottle right at my father, glaring down at him from above. My hand was shaking uncontrollably. I was terrified. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I fought down the urge to cry and told him, "Take one more step toward my mom, and I'll stab this right into you." After that incident, the moment night fell, my mother would lock me in my room from the outside. No matter how hard I pounded on the door or begged her, it was entirely useless. I often fell asleep to the sound of my mother's screams of resistance, or lay awake crying silently in the dark. Why had our family turned into this? My mother looked incredibly haggard. Every visible inch of her skin was covered in bruises left by his punches and kicks. I watched my father get worse and worse day by day. I watched my mother wither and fade day by day. Finally, the straw that broke the camel's back arrived. It was late evening. I turned off the TV, and my mother went to close the living room curtains. Halfway through, she abruptly froze, staring dead intently out the window. "What's wrong, Mom?" I walked over to her side and followed her gaze down to the street. At the base of the apartment building stood a disgustingly affectionate couple. The woman had a hot, alluring figure. She had her arms draped over the man's neck, her hand tracing his Adam's apple. When I finally got a clear look at the man's face, it felt like I had been struck by lightning. It was my father. My mother clutched the curtain fabric tightly. I snapped out of my shock and quickly yanked the other side of the curtain shut, blocking her view. Surprisingly, my mother didn't have an extreme reaction. Her voice was as soft as a gentle spring rain. "Letty." She smiled at me, a weak, desolate smile. "Mom is tired." After that, my mother fell ill from severe depression and became bedridden. She insisted on getting a divorce. My father just brushed her off. "We'll talk about it when you're better." I thought it was strange. I had assumed my father would agree without a second's hesitation. I knew my mother's illness was going to be very hard to cure. Physical wounds are easy to heal, but what about the heart? I vaguely remember that my mother looked incredibly beautiful that day. She was in uncharacteristically good spirits. She had applied a light coat of lipstick, adding a bit of color to her pale face. My mother sat on the edge of the bed. I had called my father into the room. Her tone was completely calm. "We're getting a divorce." My father frowned. My mother ignored it. Her eyes shimmered with tears, and her voice choked up slightly. But her thin, frail back was completely straight. "Michael, I'm begging you." My mother unexpectedly called my father by his full name. She looked like shattered white porcelain, her voice hoarse. "Let us go." I don't know what happened after that. They sent me out of the room. When I saw my father walk out, his back looking somewhat disheveled and his steps slightly stumbling, I suddenly really wanted to cry. This shouldn't have been their ending. They finalized the divorce papers that afternoon. My mother didn't ask for anything except me. I thought my father had compromised and finally let me and my mother go. That very night, unable to bear the heavy burden any longer, my mother collapsed and never woke up. Looking back at all of her unusual behavior that day, it was clearly a case of terminal lucidity. I should have realized it sooner. To my surprise, my father, who hadn't shown his face once during the entire funeral, was found dead in his home a few days later from an overdose of sleeping pills. The police told me that when they found my father, his stiff right hand was clutching onto something. When they managed to pry it open, they found nothing but a single purple ribbon. It turned out the us my father and mother had let go was themselves. And as for the story behind that purple ribbon, I had no way of knowing. Having lost both my parents, I was taken in by my aunt. She stroked my cheek. "Letty looks exactly like your mother." I pressed my lips together and didn't say anything. I had only met my aunt a few times, so I couldn't help but feel a little awkward. "Do you remember Nana? When you were little, she used to hold you and stare at you, absolutely refusing to let you go." My aunt had a very gentle smile. Her face, which looked somewhat similar to my mother's, inevitably reminded me of her. My mother hadn't smiled from the bottom of her heart in a very, very long time. The memory of those happy days felt far too distant. I nodded and said I had a vague recollection. But my aunt just sighed, a look of sorrow crossing her brow. "I know you're hurting right now, but I really need to ask you for a favor." She led me to a room at the end of the hall. The second we took 2 steps inside, an old woman suddenly lunged forward. My aunt helped her up and brushed the dust off her clothes. "Mom, I told you not to play on the floor." "Mom?" The old woman acted like she didn't even hear her, just muttering to herself. "My oldest daughter is back. Where is my Ellie?" I couldn't bridge the gap between the senile, white-haired old woman standing in front of me and the talkative Nana I remembered. My aunt gently coaxed the childlike Nana. "Ellie is right here. Look, didn't she come back?" Then she pointed at me. Nana looked at me too. She immediately broke into a wide grin and grabbed my arm. "Ellie is back. Mommy missed you so much." My aunt said that after Nana had attended my mother's funeral a few days ago, she had gone to sleep and woken up like this. She wouldn't even eat, just constantly muttered about finding Ellie. Ellie was my mother's nickname. I coaxed Nana into eating. One second she would be telling me to stay away from that thorn boy, and the next she would be telling me to eat more and take good care of my pregnancy. In front of me, or rather in front of Ellie, Nana was exceptionally well behaved and quiet. My aunt said Nana was probably just getting old and had developed Alzheimer's. But I thought she just missed her Ellie too much. I didn't live a bad life during the years I spent under my aunt's roof. She treated me very well. It was just that sometimes, sitting in that completely unfamiliar room, I would be overcome by a wave of emptiness. What happened after that was the story of me transmigrating into the novel. I followed the plot and left Riverside. Aside from seeing Asher once when I left, I never dreamt of him again. But this time, he showed up in my dream. He was walking alone down that small path, wearing his best white t-shirt. Bright patches of light and shadow were stitched across the fabric. He looked like he had grown taller again. His posture was as straight as a stalk of bamboo. I followed closely behind him. He took massive strides, and I was struggling to keep up. But after a short while, he seemed to slow his pace, so I didn't have to work as hard to match him. I intentionally tried to match his rhythm. I looked down to adjust my steps, but I unexpectedly crashed right into a solid back. I let out a muffled groan and looked up at the person. The second our eyes met, my eyes widened. He lowered his head, his back to the light, and stared at me. Why are you following me? The corners of his mouth hooked up into a distant smile, as if he were looking at a complete stranger. I ignored his question and asked one of my own. Do you still remember me? What's your name? Maybe I do. Having grown so used to his warmth and enthusiasm, he felt like an entirely different person right now. Asher only knew Violet. That was the name I should have given him. But I didn't. I gave him a soft smile. My name is Letty. He hadn't even opened his mouth yet, but I already knew the answer. Of course I do. The boy's voice was clear and resolute. I froze. He smiled brightly, his eyes flashing like they held the stars. Long time no see, my dear little neighbor. When I woke up from the dream, I was still in that spacious, wealthy heiress's bedroom. I was actually starting to miss Asher.
Extra. I moved to a new house. The neighbors next door have a girl my age. She's really pretty. And her name is really nice too. It's Violet. My mom told me to walk to and from school with Violet. Violet doesn't really seem to like smiling. I found a way to make her laugh. She looks so pretty when she smiles. I gave Violet a nickname, Vi. She calls me Ash. It sounds kind of cool. We're in 9th grade. We're going to high school. Vi has always been so smart. I need to work hard so I can get into the honors program with Vi. Those guys, they're making fun of me and Vi again. I didn't even dare to say anything. Worried I'd say the wrong thing and make it worse. Thank God she didn't get mad. It was kind of loud at Vi's house. I saw Vi crying. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I don't know how to comfort girls. I bought a few of the prettiest forget-me-nots I could find. Crybaby Vi looks like she's in a much better mood. She's so easy to coax. It's all thanks to me. Ha ha ha. I made it into the honors program. Lady Luck is on my side. I even have most of my classes with Vi. I lied to Vi and told her she gained weight. Ha ha ha. Honestly, she's really light. She punched me angrily. It was kinda cute. I couldn't help but laugh. Vi smells entirely like forget-me-nots. There are two really arrogant students. One kicked open the back door and immediately went to sleep. The other is a transfer student. A really pretty girl with a super cool personality. Why did I suddenly hear a ding sound in my ear? Am I hallucinating at such a young age? Vi just left without me again. And here I woke up early just to see if she'd wait for me. I'm so sad. But how come all my anger vanishes the second I see her? She brought her forget-me-nots to school. I have to protect her precious little flowers. I heard Serena is really good at taking care of plants. I was worried I'd accidentally mess Vi's flowers up. So I should go learn from Serena. I feel a bit bad bothering Serena so many times. So I'll buy her some stuff to say thank you. And Vi actually thinks she's doing a great job taking care of them herself. Such an idiot. Serena doesn't like strawberry milk. She says it's too sweet. But Vi really likes it and I really like it too. It suddenly started raining. Vi didn't have time to bring her forget-me-nots back inside. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Thank God. It was just a sun shower. Please let the flowers be okay. Class is finally over. Good thing the rain stopped quickly. Wow, there's a rainbow. Serena got blocked by some people last night. Good thing she wasn't hurt. Ethan saved her. But Ethan isn't here today, and it's too dangerous for her to walk home alone. I was originally going to say I'd find one of my buddies who lives the same way to walk her. So why did the words, "I'll walk you home," come out of my mouth? Oh, Vi. She probably didn't hear that, right? It's so weird. My heart actually hurts a little. Vi is ignoring me. She definitely heard me. Whatever, I'll just be honest with her. It was my first time hearing her talk like that. It was clearly an angry interrogation, but I felt like she was just really sad. I made her sad. My heart is cramping up and hurting again. Vi got targeted by some thugs. I wonder if she saw it was me. Did I scare her? I'm so incredibly stupid. Giving such an obvious cover-up answer. I kind of don't know how to face her. She thanked me. She's not mad at me anymore. The cops came, so I grabbed her hand and ran. I apologized to her, and she told me to carry her on my back. She's really not mad anymore. I promise I'll never let her cry again. She really is so light. Vi told me the meaning of wisteria flowers. We talked a lot, but something felt off. Her tone sounded way too much like she was saying goodbye. She said something, but I didn't hear it clearly. When I asked her again, she actually leaned right into my ear to answer. She said it was going to rain tomorrow. Does she think I'm a kid? But her breath actually smelled like flowers too. It blew against my ear, tickled so much, and it was so hot. Vi didn't come to school today. My mom told me this morning that Vi had something to do, but she didn't tell me about it. She probably just forgot. Why does my heart feel so incredibly empty, like something's been ripped out? I'm so annoyed, so annoyed, so annoyed, so annoyed. I feel panicked for no reason. The voice in my head has been playing way too frequently today. It keeps saying, "You like Serena." Do I really like Serena? I think I finally know who is actually in my heart. I'm gonna tell her myself. She vanished. I think I missed my chance with her. Day 3 since Violet left. All her contact info is gone. True love and eternal memory. I must have disappointed her. Day 7 since Violet left. My memories of her are starting to get blurry. Some force is trying to make me forget her. I can't forget her. Day 11 since Violet left. We actually had an art class. When I got home, I tried drawing a forget-me-not on the white t-shirt she liked the most. I wonder if she'd smile if she saw it. If she did, I'd gladly suffer through anything. Day 20 since Violet left. Serena and Ethan got together. I don't really feel anything, just genuinely wish them well. Watching them walk shoulder to shoulder, I suddenly remembered the idiot who used to love stepping on shadows. The idiot is gone. Now it's just me. Day 29 since Violet left. I bought a lot of forget-me-nots. The whole room smells faintly of flowers. The flowers smell really nice. I really miss her. I feel like everything about her is being erased. I can't stop it. I'm so scared. Violet, 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 Violet. I like you, Violet. And